Did you notice at the weekend that Keir Starmer finally spoke out about the Supreme Court's ruling on gender identity last week? He said he was really pleased. This is following the pro-trans protests over the weekend, which saw famous statues defaced and are expected to continue on a national scale. And it's also the deplorable scene of some public figures being caught, death being suggested for some of them, you know, kill this person, kill that person, hang them, execute, whatever, which I always kind of thought, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, I thought it was kind of against the law. Maybe I can get a bit of clarity on that and a few other things as well. Political activist and UK equality law specialist Linda Bellos joins us. Afternoon to you, Linda. Nice to have you with us.
Hello, nice to be with you.
I was about to say legend when I introduced you then as well. I mean, you've never been short of an opinion on a lot of things. I would imagine this one probably drove you to another level.
Well, I remember about 20 years ago when we as in feminists, started caring about talking about these issues and how do I put this politely? I mean, there was a range of views, but in the last 20 years, the trans argument has got really, I think, silly. I mean, we used to talk about an LGBT community, and that means it was inclusive. But these days, the trans has become toxic, and they're not. I don't know. So, as you know, I'm in addition to being a lesbian, a feminist, I'm also an African, caring about equality. I've argued for it for a long time. I know that there's been progress, a lot of progress in this country in the last 20, 30, 40 years, but the trans argument is actually, I think, out of hand. It's now getting foolish. The hostility, and I've been subject to some of that hostility myself, as many other women and many other lesbians have been. The trans argument, in the main, is frankly not. It's not practical. It occurs to me that if they can say what they do about that they are women when in fact they're men, could we in a similar way just say if you're black then you could be white, or vice versa, that if you're white you could identify as black? Would that be acceptable in British society? As in a question to you.
Yeah, well, I can answer that as a black man, as it turns out, Linda. But you're absolutely right. I mean, just to echo the point you made at the beginning. I mean, I've done this job not a long time, not quite as long as you've been campaigning, but a long time. And this issue never came up. It never came up as an issue in the sense of, not because it was being hidden away and there was a kind of hidden discrimination. I always give this example. You know, a girl won Big Brother years ago. You may remember a trans woman won Big Brother. Nobody even mentioned the fact she was trans, really. It got referenced loosely. Everybody got on with their lives. And then suddenly, what appeared to me to be not trans people, but trans activists that came along with a curious set of criteria. So you, as a lesbian woman, are meant to fancy, if you don't fancy someone who calls himself a woman even though they've got a penis, that makes you a mad transphobe, apparently. I mean, it was this kind of nonsense, wasn't it, that was sort of driving the argument into really weird areas.
I'm proud to be I'm proud to be a lesbian, and I always will be. The argument has got really silly, and I don't know. It's got nothing to do with the LGBT community that caused huge amounts of progress and equality in this country. We fought for that. An LGBT community that was actually, we didn't all agree with each other on everything, of course, but there was a unity, very, very different from the kind of, I think it's a very strange and hateful arguments that are being put forward by some trans people. And let's not assume that all trans people take the same view of this very I mean, it's a bit crackers, really.
Well, it is. It's bonkers. And it seems to me that a lot of kind of agitating males have jumped on board with this one, who have quite often, I've interviewed some of these characters, don't have any skin in the game at all on this. You know, have just decided to sort of wade in with very robust views. And, you know, there's 125 different genders and you can select any one you want on any day of the week if you want to. And by definition of that, that should entitle you to X, Y and Z, because we should all respect and acknowledge your newfound gender, even though you might have just made it up the night before with your mates in a pub.
Quite. Yes. And frankly, that's very, very disrespectful for the people who have actually, whose lives have been taken in the struggle for equality.
Yeah, 100%.
And I wish they understood, if they put themselves in the same position that I've been in since I'm 74 now. I was born in London. As a child, a very small child, and kids were on the streets in those days, you know, because there weren't not so many cars and all the rest of it. The racism I received, even as a small child, the television, you know, the N-word was not was being used on television until the 1960s.
It was in sitcoms, wasn't it? I mean, it was literally written in.
And now we wouldn't do it because we as a society wouldn't do it. Britain has understood the notion of racial equality, and it came about by argument, by discussion, by involvement. There was a lot of work that was done, but this new trans stuff seems to be making it up as you go along to be as offensive as you can be to elders. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, and it came out of nowhere almost, didn't it? It was.
Yes.
I don't know. Well, I'm sure there's a documentary in the roots of all of this, but I don't think you'd be able to authenticate it. Like, you know, what you were saying is, you know, a kid in the 70s, a kid, you know, growing up as a youngster. But pre the 70s, I remember being a kid in the 70s and, you know, looking out my window and seeing it. There was over the community centre down the way, living on a, you know, bit of a dicey estate from time to time. And there was a National Front meeting. And my mum and dad said, oh, you can't go out there today. You can't go. There's a National Front meeting. And I didn't even know what that was. It's only now. That kind of stuff was happening back then. Yeah. But there was a, you know, reasoned, well, basic logic and decency prevailed. Yeah. But there was, you know, the people had arguments and people had a backstory and a history and things to point to, etc., points of reference. This just seems like a cacophony of, like, a lot of nonsense just been thrown in by some agitators who've got maybe too much time on their hands, Linda.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very offensive for people within the so-called LGBT community to be so disrespectful for the other parts of that family. So the lesbians, the gay men, the trans stuff, this new trans stuff, I don't mean all trans stuff, this new trans stuff is, I think, just rubbish. It's made up nonsense.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, listen, Linda, there's nothing like a good chin wag with an old lefty, and you haven't let me... shouldn't have said old, should I? You haven't let me down.
No, I'm proud to be in my 70s.
You get a free bus pass and everything, don't you? You've had one of those for a while now.
I've been using it for 10 years.
Good work. Listen, I'm glad you're there. I'm glad you're still campaigning, Linda. Great to have you on. Thank you, Linda Bellos. She has been around forever, and it's interesting that her view as, you know, you might call a radical protester of the left, doesn't apply to... I think this is great evidence of the madness that this trans or this gender, I think gender debate, whatever you want, however you want to label it, she's a great example of somebody to call it out, because she speaks with a qualified backstory, not just as a minority herself for a couple of reasons, but also as a left-wing campaigner. Now, left-wing campaigners don't ordinarily like to leave anybody out of the party. But on this one, she's gone, hang on a sec, this is absolutely flipping bonkers. And she's bang on. She's absolutely bang on. You can hear Linda's story and make it work in your head. Yeah, she just said it there, you know, grew up, a lot of racism, the N-word, and God knows what else being... You can only imagine, you know, growing up, she's 74 now, so in the 60s and the 70s and the like, when she was, you know, a kid and coming into adulthood, it would have been awful. It would have been terrible to be, or in the 50s even. So she has a backstory, an authentic contribution to the argument of discrimination and progress and articulating a story and agitating for change, etc. Most people go, you know what, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Shouldn't have taken her that long, but on this, she's like the rest of us, just bereft of anything. This is just an absolute bonkers. So you've only got to look at some of those videos. I mean, the Queers for Palestine, what was it, trans... Well, there is a group called Queers for Palestine, and you know, trans and Palestine is essentially one message. Right, okay. So what is going on in the Middle East and what you're going through, because you chose to put a frock on, is the same, that's the same, there's an equivalence there, yeah? That's how nuts these people are.